Hey everybody, my name is Deja and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be recommending y'all some underrated horror book recommendations. I feel like there are so many books that I love that I never really get the chance to talk about, and a lot of other people don't really mention, especially in the horror genre, because I think the genres I probably read the most are horror and fantasy, at least in my adult life. If we count when I was like a teenager or middle school, I also read a lot of fantasy, but I feel like I've read a lot of horror books that people don't talk about enough. It's obviously spooky season, so I was going through my horror books to look at what books I wanted to recommend to y'all, and there was a whole bunch that I feel like I haven't been able to really talk about or express how much I really like them since like I read them and I did a wrap up and they were mentioned there, or some of these were never even mentioned in a wrap up or they were read years ago. And so I just wanted a chance to be able to talk about these books, especially because, as I said, I think these are all underrated, especially because I think all of these books either don't get talked about enough in general and just never have, or they used to be more popular and I feel like they need a little bit more of a comeback. Okay, like they need to be revived because these books are good. All these books I really like. I would say they're all 4 stars and above. I think like all 4.5 and 5-star books, because I really wanted to recommend y'all some of the best horror books that I read that I just never ever get the chance to talk about. The first book I'm going to recommend is one that I actually read at the beginning of my YouTube career, and that is called Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford. I actually was in a book club when I first started my channel called Stacks of Strange, where we read strange books, and this was one of our book club picks. So it is a very like strange, weird horror book. I wouldn't say it's like scary in any way. This is a very strange book. So we're following our main character Ada, and she lives with her father, and they are these weird type of healers. They're not like fully human, they're not human. Obviously this is like a weird horror book, so we never get the answers of what they actually are, but they have ability to heal people, and they all live on the outskirts of a village. So they're kind of outsiders. Like the villagers don't really hang out with them because they are like a little bit scared or nervous around them. They're not completely comfortable, but they do go to them to get healed. And Ada and her father call these people the cures, the villagers that they heal. When Ada and her father heal people, it's really strange in some ways. It's almost witch doctor-esque, but they also like literally like break open someone's body and like dig around and mess with stuff in there, or even like they'll bury them in the ground to help heal them. Literally, that's why it's called Follow Me to Ground, in part because they bury people in the ground to help heal them. And Ada has never really been interested in anybody, especially the cures. Like she has really no interest in any of them, like even hanging out with them, nothing. But then a new one comes, and his name is Samson, and she begins to have an affair with this man, and her father is obviously very displeased about this. He does not like this at all. And Samson also has a widowed pregnant sister that Ada and her father have been helping to take care of. This book is just so weird and strange. This book is really a metaphor for lust and obsession and one's autonomy and taking that back and being able to make choices for oneself for the first time. It's so weird. It's so strange, but I really loved it when I read it. And even years later, I think I literally read this book in 2021, and it still sticks with me to this day, and I think about it regularly. I really need to get a physical copy so I can do a reread of this one. I do usually recommend Follow Me to Ground for like a spring horror book, and this is another one that I also commonly recommend for like springy horror, and that is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. I love this book. It's one of my favorite YA horror books that I've ever read, and I don't think that it gets enough hype. Like I hear people talk about it occasionally, but not often at all. And as I said, this is one of the best YA horror books that I've ever read. This one follows Iris, and she is the youngest of 3 sisters, and when her and her sisters were younger, they actually disappeared. They just disappeared one night and they were gone for a few days, and when they came back, they were just a little bit different. They are like really tall and lanky and skinny and, you know, pale, and they have dark hair, and they weren't always like this, but now they are. When this book starts, we're following Iris when she's like 17 or 18, so it's been years since they disappeared. Iris's sisters obviously have their own lives. They're kind of off doing their own thing, and Iris, you know, is trying to like fit into school and things like that and thinking about like what she's going to do after. But then one of her sisters disappears. So her and her other sister, Viv, go on this quest to figure out what happened to their sister. And this one gets supernatural, but in a very different way. You guys know that I'm not big on like ghosts or spirits in horror books because it doesn't normally scare me, but this book is supernatural in a very interesting way. I honestly think if you like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I think that you would like this book. I compare that show to a lot of things, but I think they have like similar vibe components and do some similar things. They're completely different stories, but I think like if you like one, you could like the other. And this is just such a good YA. Again, it's really good for spring because you can see like there's a lot of flowers and it even has insects. So a lot of the supernatural relates to like plants, flowers, bugs, nature type things. So I think this is a good one for spring, but honestly, you could read it any time of of year. More people need to be talking about this book because it honestly is really, really good. I'm recommending a whole author for this next one, but I did choose one of their books that I think is a little bit more underrated than one of their other ones. But I fell in love with this author this year. While this author definitely has gotten traction this year, I don't think they've gotten nearly enough for how amazing their work is, and that is Mia Ballard. I love Mia Ballard. I'm a Mia Ballard stan. Mia, if you're watching this, I love you, girl. Mia Ballard writes horror for the feral girls, okay? If you want a book where a woman is feral, unhinged, truly, pick up any of her books. She currently has 3 books out. I have all of them back here. I would say her most underrated is probably We All Rot Eventually, but I do think Sugar is a little bit better than this one. I rated this one 4 stars, and I rated Sugar 4.5. I do think Shy Girl has gotten a little bit more publicity because Sugar was published at the end of 2024, and it was her first published work, and then We All Rot Eventually is like a little short novella, but Shy Girl got a decent amount of attention earlier this year, but I've only heard a few creators talk about her, and she has gotten a little bit more traction, as I said, because this book actually has gotten picked up to be published by a traditional publisher because these books have been indie published. So this book I don't think that you can buy currently, but again, this one has gotten picked up to be published, so it's a little bit more popular. Sugar, though, on the other hand, has not. As I said, I do recommend all her books, and this one is a little bit more fun, unhinged. This one I would say, please look into trigger warnings. This one literally made me cry, sick to my stomach, like staying up to 4 a.m. because I literally felt ill because this book was so horrific. So be prepared for that. But we're talking about Sugar right now because Sugar is really amazing. Okay, this is like, again, if you want unhinged woman vibes, especially, I feel like I talk about this. I made an unhinged woman book recommendations video a couple months ago, and in that video I was talking about how a lot of Black women aren't allowed to be unhinged because if they do those behaviors, they're just kind of labeled as angry or whatever, and so we don't get to see them like be unhinged, like in the way that like Jennifer from Jennifer's Body is unhinged. We don't normally see Black women get to be like that, but Mia Ballard writes that. That's what I love about her books. We're following Satara in this book, and Satara is honestly one of the most iconic characters I've consumed this entire year. I would honestly say, I was just talking about this yesterday, I started this new show called Haunted Hotel. It's on Netflix. Highly recommend you watch it. But there's a character in there, and I was like, that's honestly like the most memorable character I've read so far this year. But I was like, he's probably top 2 because I don't even know what the other one would be. I do know. It's probably Satara. I love Satara, okay? Satara is a 35-year-old woman who loves her life. She doesn't have any kids, but she, you know, she lives with her husband, and she likes things very like proper. Like you would think that she's like pretty like a proper housewife type vibe, but she finds out that her husband's cheating on her with her best friend. So she kills him. And you know what? Satara has killed men before, so she's used to this. She's just kind of annoyed because she's like, dang, like I gotta kill him. But Satara has had a long history of killing men, and we do see that throughout this book. In this, we get flashbacks to like when Satara killed other men, but then we also see her at the beginning of the book kill her husband, and that's not a spoiler. It literally happens in like the first like 20-30 pages. But in her vengeance to get back, she may or may not get intertwined with a love witch. This book is crazy. It's unhinged. It's a female serial killer. I love this book. The only thing is the ending was like one thing I did not like. I was like, that everything else I loved except that one thing. But this book is so good. More people need to talk about Mia Ballard in general because I've only seen like literally like 3 or 4 creators talk about her, but we talk about her all the time, but nobody else in the horror community has been talking about her, and her books are literally phenomenal. So please go pick it up right now or else. So please, 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 please go pick up this book. It's honestly so phenomenal. Jackal is another amazing horror book that does not get enough attention, and the commentary in this one is so poignant and strong. I can't help but love this book, and I need to recommend it to y'all because literally I don't hear anybody talking about this. If you like Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson, but you want kind of more like a supernatural horror twist on that book, Jackal. You need to pick up Jackal. We're following Liz in this book, and she is a Black woman who grew up in a predominantly white town in, I believe, Pennsylvania, I want to say. And she's kind of stayed away from this town since she turned 18 because it is not the friendliest town to Black people, of course. But her childhood best friend is getting married. So she ends up going back to this town for this wedding. And on the night of the wedding, the daughter goes missing in the forest. And our main character begins to look into this, obviously, because she cares about this little girl. She's like, this little girl who is now the daughter of my best friend went missing. Like, we have to look for her. But then she starts to notice a pattern that other Black girls have disappeared in these woods in this town multiple times over and over and over again And so she's trying to figure out what's taking these Black girls, why are they disappearing, and why is it only them? This book is so good. It has so much commentary. Again, I think if you like Monday's Not Coming, this book has similar commentary, but took it in a supernatural horror twist. It's just so interesting, and obviously, of course, we need to be supporting our Black authors. This next book is very similar in the setup, and that is When the Reckoning Comes. This one, again, has such poignant commentary. It is a very similar setup to Jackal, but it has commentary on something different, but still racial, which is very, very important, of course. I think this one follows Mira, I think her name is, yes. And she's from a small segregated town in the South. And so obviously, again, she has not gone back to it since she really turned 18 because it is a very racist town, but she has actually a white best friend. And so she decides, obviously, she's going to go back to the town for her childhood best friend's wedding, but her best friend is actually getting married on a plantation that is rumored to be haunted. And turns out it is haunted, okay? And these people, these former slaves, are not happy about this wedding taking place. And they begin to seek their vengeance. As I said, I don't really like ghosty, supernatural in that way type of horror books, but I did really like this one because, again, I feel like the ghosts aren't the horror. Like, the ghosts are in the story, but they're used to show Black pain and generational trauma and how deeply rooted slavery is in the Black community, and that's what it's used for. But the real horror of the story is the racism. And so when these types of books happen, like, I'm even thinking the reformatory, which I didn't put in this because I don't think it's underrated, but they are very similar in that sense where they have ghosts, but it's not the horror of the story. The racism and what people do is the true horror, and that's what this is. It's so good, but it's definitely a difficult read. I don't think I could ever reread this book, but I think it's very important, and a lot more people need to pick this book up because it has so much important things to say. I also have to recommend Stuff for the Children by Craig DeLuey. I read this book when I first started reading horror, and it is literally a standout horror for me. Like, I think about this book all the time. I need to get a physical copy because I love it. I need to reread it. I've read a little bit of Craig DeLuey's work since I read this book, and I haven't loved it. So if you love his current work, I don't know if you would love this one. This book is very unique, and we're following a variety of perspectives. So in this book, all of the children in the world die, just basically at the same time. And we are following the aftermath of that and the adults that are left over. We're following parents, not parents, like a whole bunch of different people. And we're seeing this big world event happen through different people's lenses. And we're obviously seeing these people grieving the loss of these children, and even like the logistical aspects of like, how are they going to dispose of like so many bodies? And it's just so interesting to see like what would happen in that type of situation. But then a few days later, all of the children begin to resurrect and come back to life, but they have a interesting hunger that is taking over. And we see in this book especially how far parents and people will go to provide for their children. And I've read books with that commentary in it before, but the way that it was done in this story, I feel like showed so much realism, because sometimes, of course, like we'll see like situations where like a mother is trying to protect her kids against like a killer or something like that. Of course, that does happen in real life. In this one, it's obviously not realistic in the sense that like all of these children die and they come back, and you know, that is not something that happens, but we see how resources get depleted and the lengths that people will go to get these resources, which I think is very, very important in our current world, because we think about resources with our economy right now, things are very expensive, and we're even thinking about like healthcare cuts and like how people aren't going to have healthcare and what they're going to have to do if their kids need medical care, but they don't have insurance. And so I think that this is such an interesting exploration. It is so fascinating to me. I love this book. That's why I think I really need to reread it, because I think today it would be even more poignant than it was when I first read it. Another one that is just drenched in commentary is Night's Edge by Liz Kieran. I just read this book earlier this year, and I've heard maybe like a few people talk about this. Mainly my friend Haley Hughes. She was the person I heard about this book from, but even she read it like I think the year that it came out, which I think was 2022, I want to say. So since then, or 2023, but even since then, I feel like in the past 2 years, she hasn't talked about this book as much. So I really wanted to bring it back up, especially since I read it for the first time this year. This is a vampire book, but I think it is a little bit untraditional. This one follows Mia, who's like an early 20-something-year-old, and she actually had to grow up very, very quickly because of her mother. And so we also get flashbacks. When Mia was around 11, I believe, her mom got turned into a vampire, and she is a very traditional vampire. Like vampires in this are pretty typical, where like they can't go out in the sun, they have to drink blood, all that typical vampire stuff. And because of that, and Mia being in a single parent household, she had to grow up very quickly, because obviously if her mom can't go out in the sun and needs this blood, she literally is asleep all day and then goes out to hunt blood at night and do whatever. And Mia's basically left to kind of fend for herself the majority of the time. And so we're following her as she's now like 20 years old, and she is kind of sick and tired of this life. She wants more for herself, and she kind of wants to leave her mom behind. And she meets another girl who gives her that opportunity. And she also begins to explore her sexuality with this girl. So that's another part of this book where we're exploring her sexuality. But the main commentary in this book is for having an addict parent. I don't know what that's like at all, but this book so strongly is displaying the relationship that a child can have when they have an addict for a parent. Even we see what it's like when your parent has a partner that abuses them or treats them horribly, and especially if you live in a single parent household and that's not your other parent, and how hard that is, and just how resentful children can become because of that, and the things that they'll do. And this book at the end, honestly, is so heartbreaking. The end really, really broke me. It's so bleak, okay? It's a very bleak ending, but it does actually have a sequel, which I do own. So I'm interested to read it because I feel like this ended in such a good way, where it was just that perfect level of bleakness where you're like, damn, like I love when I read a horror book and I'm just like, well, that was dark. And that's how this book was. In a sense, it's not dark horror wise. We don't get a lot of on page direct like horror, blood, guts, but that commentary was so intense and dark that it really, really impacted me. And so I'm interested to see how the sequel is going to go. I'm kind of nervous because I'm like, this one again ended so good that I just don't know how we can continue. I think this is the only 2025 release I have on this list, because usually if a book comes out that year, a lot of people talk about it because that's when most people read it, is the year that it gets published. But I still think this one is very underrated, especially compared to this author's other book, and that is Immaculate Conception. I really, really enjoyed this book, and I was kind of debating my rating because I did have a couple issues with it, but it's one of those books where like at first you're like, okay, like I had a couple issues with it, so it's not like a full like 5 stars or I loved it because of whatever. But the more that you get distance from the book, you start to kind of forget the things that you didn't like, and you just remember what you did like, and you think about how good it actually was. That's how this book was for me. So like I did have a couple little like critiques and things that weren't my favorite when I read the book, but this is a book that I think about almost every single day since I read it earlier this year, which is very shocking for me because Natural Beauty by this author was a book that has been very popular on BookTube, especially I feel like for the past couple years, and this is the author's newest release. And I read Natural Beauty earlier this year as well, and that one was a little bit disappointing for me. I still liked it, but it went differently than I thought it would, and I was a little bit disappointed. This one was really something else, and I really, really adored the commentary because this is such, again, like a unique book. I feel like the commentary that it has, I haven't really read in another book. This book I feel like is kind of hard to describe because there's so much that I want to tell you, but I feel like if I tell you, it doesn't make it as good of a reading experience. We're following Anka, and she is an artist. So she goes to art school and she meets this other girl named Matilda, and she becomes very fascinated and enthralled with Matilda. And a big thing that's talked about in this book is AI. And so we see how AI and technology is kind of impacting their art, but then we also see that Matilda does get a lot of traction in the art scene while they're still in art school, and that makes our main character Anka very jealous in a sense, and we see that jealousy and that rage kind of come up in her a lot throughout this story, and how that impacts the whole rest of the course of the story. So we're following them when they meet in art school and how their relationship develops and changes and kind of like the faults that they have. But then Matilda goes through some really hard mental health challenges later on when she's like, I want to say probably like in her 30s or 40s, and there is this new technology that has been invented called the scaffold, and it's supposed to be this empathy creating technology where basically someone can kind of enter the consciousness of somebody else and experience their trauma, and so they get exposed to the other person's trauma through their mind, kind of. It's really hard to explain the technology, but they get exposed to their trauma, and it's supposed to also relieve how the trauma affects the person that they entered the mind of, and it's like a permanent connection. And so Anka is considering doing this for Matilda, and this book has so much to talk about with autonomy, with AI, and obsession, and that true like envy, jealousy that can happen. And I think the reason that I like this book so much is because of that envy and jealousy. I think this has so much commentary on a very amazing topics. I feel like it does the commentary for all of them pretty well, but that jealousy and envy commentary just stood out to me because I actually am a pretty like jealous, envious person, and it's something that I work on every day. I try not to let it affect my relationships or how I interact with my friends, because it's definitely like a me thing, but it's something I am very conscious of and I've been working on for years since I was a teenager, because I've literally been this way since I was like a child, or especially like I feel like in middle school is when that started to pop up a lot more in me personally. And so seeing that and taking it to such an extreme, I was like just really gagged, because it's something more personal to me. And again, I think this one's really underrated. It has been talked about a bit this year, but for it being a new release horror book, not enough people have been talking about this. And honestly, I feel like a lot of the new release horror books haven't been getting that much hype except for a few, but this one definitely needed more hype this year and it didn't get it. And I'm confused on where all the hype was for this book. This next author I feel like is a pretty well-known horror author. I see a lot of people talk about her, especially I feel like her work is really amazing for people who don't typically read horror, so a lot of people talk about her. And I think this one is one of her most underrated books, but it is my favorite book, and that is Black Sheep. I've seen majority of people talk about The Return, Cackle, and Such Sharp Teeth. Outside of that, I don't really see people talk about her books so much, but this is literally my favorite one. Again, if you like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, like if you love that show, you will love this book. It's literally perfect for that vibe, and especially like season 1. I love that show season 1, and then after that I feel like it kind of and you know it didn't go good, okay? But if you like that first season and you're craving that, especially because the show did go downhill, you need to pick this one up. It is literally so good. Like, it is so good. We're following Vesper, and Vesper grew up in a cult, okay? This girl grew up in a cult and she escaped and she's just living her life now. And obviously because she grew up in a very religious community, they don't allow their current members to talk to outsiders. So she has no contact with her family. But one day she gets a letter in the mail from her cousin that she was super close to, and it is an invitation to her wedding. But it turns out her cousin is actually getting married to Vesper's ex that she was with and supposed to marry when she was in the cult before she escaped. And so she's obviously like, oh, hell nah. Like, y'all are just gonna not talk to me because of this religious cult vibes or whatever, and then you're gonna invite me to a wedding and it's literally between my cousin and my ex? That's crazy. So I'm gonna show up. And she does go show up. And we see a lot of her family dynamics, especially the relationship with her mother. And there's a lot of complex dynamics there, but then we're also exploring like the religiosity and the cult vibes. But this one is a little bit more goofy. Like, all of her horror, people describe it as like cozy, and it's not goofy per se, but it's more lighthearted. And if you've seen The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, you know what I'm talking about. It was so wonderful. My microphone died and I had to wait 2 hours for it to charge, and I'm exhausted and want to get into my pajamas. So let's keep going. So I think I was talking about Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison, and I was saying that this one actually isn't goofy. That was the wrong word to describe it. I feel like it's dark but fun. And if you've seen The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I would also describe that show that way. And so you can kind of get the vibe. We just have like, even like Supernatural, like that show, I feel like it's dark but fun. There's a lot of dark but fun like media out there. Now we are getting into one of my favorite books of the year. This is definitely top 5. I would also put Shy Girl in top 5 too, if that motivates you to pick either of these up. And this one is A Botanical Daughter. I love this one, but all the horror girls are like, no, I can't do a historical setting. I'm like, guys, I get it, but me, I'm gonna eat up a historical setting in a horror book every single time. Yum, 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 eat it up. I love a historical horror, okay? Period. And this is actually Frankenstein retelling, which Frankenstein is one of those books where when I originally read it, I actually rated it lower, but as I've gotten more distance from it, I think about it a lot and I really look back fondly on that book. I think I just had an original negative cast on it because I actually read it for school, which already put you up to not like the book, you know? But there are a lot of books that I did read for school that I enjoyed, but this one was with my least favorite fucking teacher. Like, I actually hated her. Honestly, might be my least favorite teacher, professor, anything that I've ever had. Like, she was that fucking diabolical. So I think it was one of those things where I was like, I fucking hate this book because I fucking hate this class because I fucking hate this teacher, you know? So I think if I read it again, I would actually adore it. So I plan on rereading it hopefully soon. But this one kind of scratched that itch and gave me those Frankenstein vibes that I love. We're following 2 men in Victorian England, and they're actually gay and in a relationship. So they live out in the middle of nowhere, basically just in the countryside, to kind of like hide their relationship away from the world, because obviously they probably would have been discriminated against because of the time. And each of these men are into like specific topics. So, and one of our characters acquires a fungi that's really rare vampire, and he comes up with this plan to basically combine it with taxidermy and put it into a body, and it animates it and it comes to life like Frankenstein. And this is now basically these two men's child, and it's very, very weird how they have this relationship with this plant corpse Frankenstein, and it's just so good. Like, I love the relationship dynamics. And there's another character in this book that is not in the synopsis. I don't want to spoil it, but I love how they played into the entire story. This was literally so good. It's so queer. It's historical Frankenstein retelling. Like, please pick it up, because nobody talks about this book. I think I've heard literally one person talk about this book, and that was when it originally came out. And this is literally such a amazing book. It needs to be hyped up. Next up is Goddess of Filth by V. Castro, and I love this book so much. When I read it, I adored it, but I've since read my least favorite book of all time since reading this, and it's also by this author. So I do still recommend this book, but you know, it kind of paints like a bad light on all of her work, because that book, it's called Immortal Pleasures, was honestly so horrific, so bad, so harmful that honestly, I wish I could run it over with a truck, a semi-truck, toss it into the ocean, take it out, put it into a bonfire, and then shred it into multiple pieces and feed it to a lion. Like, honestly, I hated that book, okay? But Goddess of Filth really is an amazing short novella. We follow a group of 5 teenage girls that are all friends, and this one takes place in Mexico, I believe. And these girls decide that they're gonna host a seance, but it's kind of like, you know, when girls play like Bloody Mary. I mean, I never did that, because what do I look like? Playing Bloody Mary? Absolutely not, but you know, that's common or whatever. So they like are just be like, hee hee ha ha, we're gonna host a seance. And then one of them literally starts acting weird and crawling over the floor and speaking in their ancient Aztec language of their ancestors. And then she starts acting weird. She's normally very shy, but then starts doing very, very strange behaviors. And our main character begins to believe that she is possessed. I told you guys, I don't like ghosts. I don't like possessions. I don't like haunted houses typically, or they don't usually work for me. I don't normally love them, but this book I really loved it. Even though it was a possession story, I love the way it explored friendship. It's very similar to like The Craft in a way. I really think it is. And I know a lot of people love My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I didn't love that book, and I feel like this is kind of a comparable title. Like, if you want that but darker, more like The Craft kind of vibes and with more social commentary, I think that this one is honestly a better version of that. Don't shoot the messenger. There's literally a fly in here, and it's been in here since yesterday, and I don't know where it goes because it literally disappears, but then it'll pop back up and it keeps flying by me, and it's freaking me out. Like, I'm actually about to lose my mind. Nana by Brandon Massey is also kind of another fun, ridiculous horror book that's really just, as I said, it's fun. Like, it's just a good time, and I really, really liked this one. This one follows Monica, and, you know, she has a typical life. She has a husband, she has some kids. She actually was adopted and never knew her biological parents, but then one day, her biological mother shows up on her doorstep and, you know, claims to be like, hey, I'm your biological mother, and Monica actually accepts her with open arms and brings her into her home, and this woman begins to become a part of the household and taking care of chores and cooking and taking after the kids, and she also begins to, like, be a comfort to Monica, especially like the family dog dies mysteriously, so she comforts her then. And she also helps Monica because she starts to fall ill, like really, really ill, and Monica begins to look older and older every single day. They're not sure why, but this woman who is her biological mother, Grace, begins to look younger and younger, and Monica's husband begins to suspect something is up, and he's determined to figure out what is actually happening to his wife. This one again is kind of fun and ridiculous, but it was such like a good time. And I do like the commentary and dynamics that were explored with the family. I think it was very interesting, and also seeing such a strong marriage in this book. I feel like a lot of horror books don't have the strongest marriages, but I feel like this one had a pretty strong one. I also really love The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. This is another one that I read for my book club Stacks of Strange, and I absolutely adored this one, and it's very interesting. So we're actually following a woman who is a clone of another woman. So we get her perspective, but she is actually the clone of the scientist who made this cloning research. So she developed this research and made a clone of herself, and she is actually having an affair with her originator's husband. So the clone is having an affair with her originator's husband, but then, you know, the man ends up dead, okay? And these two women have to now clean up this mess and figure out their new dynamic without this man in the center. This book is really interesting, and I feel like it talks a lot about self and internalizing feelings, and it's just really interesting. I honestly need to reread this one because I remember really, really loving it, and it's been quite a few years since I read this, so I think a reread should be happening sometime soon. This next one is one that I feel like was really, really hyped up the year that it came out. I think it came out, let me check. It came out in 2022. Everybody talked about it that year. Everybody put it on their favorites list. Everybody was raving about this book so much, but then nobody's talked about it since 2022. And I feel like we need to bring her back. We need to revive her because this is such a good book. That's We Spread by Ian Reid. Oh, this is Ian's best work. This one follows Penny, who is an artist, and she is in her older age. Like, she's definitely getting to the elderly life stage, and her partner that she had for years actually passed away and didn't tell her, but made plans for her to actually go to this retirement home. I think it's really more of like a long-term care facility, and she didn't go there for years, but she's had one too many accidents now, so she ends up going to this facility and finding out about it, and she begins to like make friends and feel comfortable in her life, and she even starts to paint again. But she begins to slip and like feel like she's losing reality and doesn't understand the passage of time anymore. And we kind of don't know if she's aging or if there's something else that's affecting her mental capacity and her cognitive abilities. And this book is just so interesting, exploring aging. And I think aging, and especially like being elderly or dying, is not something that we talk about as often as we should. And recently I've actually been reading a lot of books that have characters, I would say, that are like elderly. Like, I'm gonna say like 55 plus, okay, is older to me. Like, you're technically in older adulthood, okay? I'm in multicultural lifespan development right now, so don't fight with me, fight with your mama, okay? But there, 55 plus is all kind of old. And then, you know, once you get to like 70, I feel like you're like really considered elderly. But I've been reading a lot of books with like characters that are like 60 plus recently, and I've been really, really enjoying all that commentary. But this is one of the first books that I read that actually had a character of that age. This one was just so poignant and well crafted that you have to pick this one up.
Happy Halloween, everybody. It's Kat Deja here. I'm dressed up for Halloween. Obviously, it's Halloween today, and I'm editing this video currently to hopefully get it out to y'all today on Halloween. And while I was literally just talking about We Spread by Ian Reid, I was thinking about how I recently read a book that I really wanted to recommend. I read it since filming this video, so I couldn't have included it originally, but that is The Honest Springs Retirement Home Massacre. This is a new release, and you guys have to pick this up. It is literally like Only Murders in the Building, but make it horror, but it still has that mystery element. They're exploring this mystery with our main character, who moves to this retirement home of people in her retirement home like getting killed off one by one. And so it is a massacre. It is like a slasher horror book, but it takes place slowly over the course of days, and we are like investigating this mystery, but then it does kind of turn into horror. And then we also get the perspective of the actual victims when they're getting killed. So then that's kind of what brings the horror element, is being able to see those scenes described so distinctly. I really, really love this book, and I've been recommending it to so many people, and everybody has been loving it. If you love that Only Murders in the Building vibe, where it's like a funny mystery, even like the Thursday Murder Club, but you want something that is a little bit more horror, you have to pick this one up, okay? Please pick it up.
The last book that I'm going to mention is Bless Your Heart by Lindy Ryan. This is kind of like a cozy horror in the sense that it is a horror book, but it's very, very, very comedic in tone. We are actually following a matriarch family of women, so the Evans women, in 1999 in Texas, and we just follow these women from all different life stages. I think from grandmother or great grandmother all the way down to like an infant. So we're just following these women. There's no men in the family for whatever reason, and they actually run a funeral parlor, and everything's normal. But then suddenly one of the people who just died, and you know they brought them in, ends up rising from the dead, and it's actually a Strigoi vampire. And there's actually a history in this family of the Evans women killing and hunting vampires, and some of these women have no idea that their family had this history, but obviously the older ones do. And so more people in this town start dropping dead as well as rising from the dead, and these women are on a mission to protect their town and kill all these vampires that are popping up. This one's so interesting, following a matriarchal family and seeing them in literally every single different life stage. And as I said, it's very fun and comedic. I really, really enjoy this, and I actually cannot wait to pick up the second book, which I think may have to do with a werewolf. I'm not 100% sure, but those are all of my book recommendations today. I hope that you guys got some horror books that maybe you've never heard of before or that you hear about less often, because a lot of these books I I really don't ever really hear about, but I love them so much. Like every single one of these, I highly, highly, highly recommend. Let me know if you guys have any underrated horror book recommendations down below, because I want more recs. Like these are such hidden gems and I want more hidden gems. So if you have them, please give them to me. And while you're down there, leave the bat emoji for bless your heart, and I will see y'all next one. Bye everybody.
I'm writing rhymes in the kitchen, soaking in moments we live in. Yeah, you got the nerve to be on me.